Good evening, everyone. It's the one, the only, the gorilla in the econo mist coming to you live on another special edition of Rogue Money Radio. Guys, if you haven't got a chance to check us out already, follow us on Twitter at the Rogue Money. Check us out on roguemoney.net, as well as the Rogue Money Facebook page. And if you haven't gotten a chance to listen in earlier on, back around maybe like 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we did a special, post inauguration broadcast where we talked about the election, the inauguration of Donald Trump. The year ahead, we have had a million and one guests on. At that time, we had Sean from SGT Report, Dave from X22 Report, the entire Rogue Money team, pretty much. It was an awesome time. So if you haven't had an opportunity to check it out, go back and check it out. Now, this morning, guys, if you were tuned in onto the radio show, the mornings with V and CJ, I kind of broke down a little bit about tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is really, this is so serious. And all kidding aside, I mean this from the inner recesses of my very soul. The guest I have tonight is Ivan Thorn. He has an amazing life story. He has an amazing philosophy. This is an individual whose message you need to hear. I was so moved by Ivan's work that, I want to know who this guy was. He has a background as, in the financial world. He's also an adept historian in ancient Japanese warfare. So he's like a warrior poet, this guy. An absolute modern day warrior poet, a warrior philosopher. That's who Ivan is. So I said, okay, this guy seems pretty interesting. So I did something. I went on Amazon. I had my Kindle. I downloaded a sample of the book. Let me download a sample, see how it is. Now, guys, here's the deal. If you know me, you would know that I am a productivity maven. I love productivity, self-improvement. I've loved guys like Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone, David Allen with GTD, getting things done for organizational, for organization and things like that. Tim Ferriss. I got Tim Ferriss's latest book, Tools of the Titans. Anybody who spent time with me would know that I love human performance, that I exude human performance. People around me who spend enough time with me know that, hey, man, I'm a very motivating person. So when I was reading Ivan's book, what stood out to me the most, I said to myself, wait a minute, my God, this is not a typical, self-help book. This is not a typical productivity book. This was something more. And after I got through the 10th or 12th page on the sample, I said, screw it, man. I need to download it. So I immediately downloaded the entire book, and I started ravenously reading it. Got through the introduction. It was a big introduction. We went through over 100 points on his book in the initial stages. And then he gets into chapter 1, where he starts to break down the book is called The 9 Laws, where he starts to break down what the 9 laws were. And then I said to myself, oh no, the digital copy of the book is not enough for me. I went back to Amazon. I paid money, not for the paperback, but for the hardcover, because I realized this is a book that's going to stay in my library, that I'm going to be reaching for every so often. This is one of those books that I'm going to keep coming back to. And it's going to be one of those books that when you come into my office, into my library, you're going to see the pages are well worn. You're going to see highlights left and right, notes in the margins. This is going to be something that's well read. I was never in my life have I been so blown away. And I said to myself, this man's work is a modern day Sun Tzu art of war, but for the individual, for the man in particular. The concepts that Ivan Thorn brings out is so unique. It's completely original. It was so thought-provoking. It moved me to commit. And I told this to my wife. I said, I'm going to read this book cover to cover. I'm going to allow this book to strip me naked, to throw me into the dark waters of who I am and what motivates me as a man, and how to survive in a world that is as barbarous, that is as absolute, and that is as ferocious as it was when the first man walked this ground. So without further ado, guys, listen in very carefully. And I want to tell you guys right now, Ivan he's hearing impaired. So what you will see is there's going to be a little bit of delay from me asking questions to Ivan, from him answering it, because it has to be caught by what's called a captioner. The captioner is a person who's capturing these questions so Ivan can see it. So bear with us for the time, but if you listen in, you will be blown away. Without further ado, Ivan Thorne, sir, thank you. It is my honor. I've come into this as a mere wanting to be a student, and seeing you as a guru in this, and I say to myself, my God, I'm willing to take a backseat and say, sir, take us where you will go tonight. Ivan Thorne, thank you, sir.
So, V, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be on the show with you. Was very gratified to hear that you were as moved as you were and so immediately touched by the 9 laws. I've put a great deal of thought, some thought, effort, and really it is a distillation of what I've faced out there on the world. And being deaf as I am, one of the things that my life has lacked from the time I lost my hearing is an expectation of pity. It's not there. And over time, I came to understand that that's true for everybody. Expectations of pity are not something that any man who wishes to succeed in this world should bear. And so as part of that, what I thought was, right now, I just turned 46. I've had a fascinating life. I've done a lot of interesting things. I've gone through a lot of joy, pleasure, and pain. And I'm at a point now where I felt it appropriate and potentially valuable to share some of those lessons. What have I learned? What's kept me alive? What's made me successful? Where have I found joy? How have I learned to protect the important things in my life? Because ultimately, as you point out so accurately, this world is barbarous. It has not changed since the first human being stepped forward and presented himself as the new apex predator on the planet.
Yes.
And as part of showing that, I had to come up with a way to really crystallize all of my life experiences into something that someone could not just read, but actually digest and use and come back to and find a recurring deep value to it. So how would I do that? And that was something that I'd kicked around for quite a bit. And as I started my website, darktriadman.com, a little bit more about what the dark triad is in this context a little bit later. One of the things every blogger does, right? We need to have a lead magnet, give something away to people. So I thought, okay, I don't want to just drop something out there. I need something that's valuable. So I came up with a free ebook called The 9 Laws, which is now the classic edition, which you can still get there for free. And covered down, how do I see things? How do I break this down? So the 9 laws, the first one is survival. The moment you're no longer alive, you cease to have any ability to impact fate. So that's the first law. Mm-hmm. Concealment is the second. How do I avoid the gaze of a predator who is more competent than I am? Growing up as a deaf boy, you're typically not going to be in the position of dominating socially. So being under the gaze of more competent predators was a familiar experience to me. How do you conceal? Not hide, that's different, but conceal. What's my purpose? Why am I here? So if you've read the preface, The Dying Child, it talks a little bit about contracting inside, from that moment on the floor, sitting up and deciding not to collapse, not to despair, not to give up.
Yeah.
What's my purpose? And the laws go further, talking about endurance, posture, freedom, power, preposterousness, how insanely improbable everything is. And then the last is that there are no laws. We are all here as raw animals on this world, and we have to make the best of it as we can. So the 9 laws is really my distillation of methodology. How do I do this? Why do I do it this way? How do I see things?
It's an incredible approach, because every other person that deals with this type of subject matter, every other person just paints a picture of this, rosy, wonderful world. Yes, you have challenges, but if you, say to yourself, a certain catchphrase or whatnot, that your life will magically transform. What you're putting forth is that you have to go deeper into who you are to really capture your true potential and your true power and how to operate in this world, whether it's business, whether it's relationship, whatever it is, whatever challenges you face. What the nine laws is you're really calling for a much deeper walk, correct?
That's correct. And really, ultimately, what it boils down to is how does this universe operate, what I call the dark world. And I think very important to clarify for people. Sometimes people hear a dark triad, dark world, and I think, oh, he's being dramatic, or this is the new Darth Vader. No, I'm using it in a very specific way.
Mm-hmm.
The dark world is not dark because it's horrific or brutal or because there are terrible things that happen to people. Men experience sorrow, pain, and resentment. That's not why it's dark. It's dark because it's finite. It ends, just like all of us do. So it's condensing. It's a narrowing. It is a temporary existence. It's not infinite. So that's why it's dark. Now, when I talk about the dark triad, what does that actually mean? Well, colloquially speaking, you'll see that thrown around a lot on various different medium, social media. Oh, Trump's a narcissist. This person is a narcissist. Oh, that's a psychopath. Oh, they're crazy. Oh, he's a manipulator or Machiavellian. And that's really a glossing over in a bluntly, I will say, a stupid fashion of what this actually is. And the dark triad, as it is known, you have Machiavellianism, you have narcissism, and you have psychopathy. Those are distillations of very normal human traits. They can be dysregulated, they can become disorders, but ultimately they are a focusing, they are a sharpening. You use the term iron sharpens iron. Yeah. The dark world is certainly an iron place to live. And as a human being, you have within you three things that you can sharpen, forge together, and turn into a tool to crack the world open, engage the gears, and then drive it. And that's the purpose of the 9 laws. I want men to be mechanics of their own life. I want them to be the driver. I want them to be the refueler, not just a complaining navigator who may or may not get where they wish to go. So I talked a bit about what those three things are. People talk about your heart, your emotions, your mind, your thinking, what you say, what your intention is, thought, word, and deed. Those are the three fundamental legs of the stool. And the process of the 9 laws is to take men from that basic concept, how you think, how you feel, how you speak, what you conceive of, what you see, where you execute, and condense them down. It's a focusing of the self. So your word becomes plans, your thought becomes vision, your deeds become competent. And then you take that a step further, and that's where you end up with those dark triad traits. Your planning becomes Machiavellianism, where utility is something that is very purely focused. Your vision becomes narcissism because you believe in something that is preposterously not yet true, but from the very force of your intention, like mass, it shifts the universe in your direction. And then competence, of course, becomes psychopathy, where empathy, where emotions are not necessarily driving you, you're aware of them, but what must be done is what takes place, and you become the agent for that in the world. And all of those things condense down to the point of impact, and that's where fate itself, and I like to use the term fate, detonates, or it collapses. And over you may have seen at the beginning of the 9 laws the image that lays out the grid, as I call it, of the dark world and how the 9 laws go through, and those channels and realms and controls. Those are the gears. That's how the dark world operates, and that's what I'm trying to give men and expose them to and show them that they too have the ability to tear off the covers, to tear off the hood of the vehicle of this life we have and own it.
Absolutely. That grid, it really is. When I was looking at it, I was visualizing that grid and seeing what you put on there and looking at it very carefully. It is absolutely the gearing and the mechanisms of the very rudiments of the world that we live in. A world that we so often neglect, that we take for granted, that we overlook because we are so distracted by things that we see that we perceive to be are the real reality of control over us. And we are so often pushed about as just mere vessels, just floating aimlessly, given to about any sort of wind of change, helpless, like you say, a complaining navigator on the course of life rather than somebody who's steering his own destiny. And I think in 2017, one of the greatest things that people can do, people talk about, New Year's resolutions, which are for 99% of people are just New Year's well wishing. And I think we need to move beyond New Year's well wishing and make absolute resolutions, a severe determination, an absolute severe decision to actually do something different with our lives this year. And I believe that, we have a window of time, a window of opportunity that is finite and that we do need to seize the day. So I totally get what you're saying. Absolutely, Ivan.
No, I think that's very important. None of us know for certainty whether we'll wake up in the morning. And to that very point, think about how you approach the day. Lots of people out there, millions of them, make New Year's resolutions. But do you wake up in the morning, not with your hair on fire to chase a dream, but saying to yourself, oh my God, I'm not dead. I'm here. I have a chance. One of the things I love about old people, especially old men, everything that ever tried to kill them failed. What do they know? What could they share? Well, I'm 46. I'm heading into my 50s at this point. I think I look fairly well preserved. But still, there's a sense of mortality there. And that's really how this book started. What am I leaving behind? In the world of the financial markets and financial planning and working with mutual funds and all of those things, ultimately today, what is it? It's ones and zeros. We're dealing with digital information. And I realized that there was nothing I could look back to from my professional career and point to and say, I built that.
Yeah.
There's no building that still stands. There's no statue. There's no temple. And it occurred to me, all of the projects, it's one thing to say, you've got a multi-million-dollar project with tens of thousands of hours, but where is it after a year? 6 months after it's gone, it's forgotten, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
The 9 laws was my way to crack open the world long enough to drive a fissure into it that other people can see it. So to me, the 9 laws is something that will live on after I'm dead. And that's the point of it. If I've hit truth, if I've really touched it, if I've opened it up and handed it to my brothers out there, it will live on. And my secondary purpose there, that's my personal purpose for this work. Secondarily is where men of the West take it. Those who read the 9 laws will see I am very specific. This is aimed at men of the West. This is not a manual for folks in Asia to overcome the West. This is not a manual for Islam. In fact, I'm quite specific about where I see things going with respect to some of those potential threats to the West. But I'm a son of the West. That's my culture. That's my heritage. I wish it to survive. So this is my gift to my brothers there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How has the 9 laws affected you? How did you discover it?
Well, I think the first thing was the experience of losing my hearing. I was 4 years old. So those of you that may have read the preface will be familiar with that experience. Helen Keller said something interesting once, I think is quite true, that being blind cuts you off from things, but being deaf cuts you off from people. So as I grew up, lip reading was something that was beyond critical of a skill. And as part of that, something most people don't, I think, truly grasp is two things. Number one, specifically where lip reading is concerned, that's just about 20% of it, 30% at most. Hearing is a tiny piece of it. I wear a hearing aid, but it's not that great. But almost all of it is context and body language, facial expressions. And the thing that you discover when you're a child, when you have that blunt honesty inside, is, are people telling the truth or not? It doesn't matter what people say. Watch what they do. Watch how they act. Because most of the time, words are untrue. And as I grew, I came to understand that that's just simply the nature of human beings. Not to be offended at lies or untruths. That's simply a part of the tools that people use when they interact with each other. Now, that being said, how do you get at the truth? So what I had to come up with was a way to grasp the world, a way to see it, a way to survive it, most importantly. Today I'm a pretty big guy, 6'3", about 260 pounds. I won't tell you my bench press, but it's more than most men. But when I was growing up, I was very small for my age. I was ahead of my peers in school, so I was moved up a grade. So here I am, younger, smaller, socially probably a little stunted, not able to really interact with my peers the way I should. So what I did was I spent my time observing. I spent my time reading and learning, asking questions, and trying to understand how this truly works. Because I knew that if I could survive long enough, I would figure it out. And that's really where the 9 laws came from. How do I survive? How do I not get killed? How do I stay out of the gaze of those who want to actually take you out? That's all the way true from avoiding a bully on the hallways at school to, think about being in a totalitarian regime. I remember being in junior high and being introduced to what took place in the bloodlands of World War II in the Ukraine, when the Nazis and the Germans came in and massacred enormous numbers of people. How do you avoid that? How do you hide from that? You can't hide. How do you conceal from that? Well, that was something that occurred to me as well. I grew up, interesting parentage. My father was a Royal Horse Guards officer, very conservative, very traditional. My mother was a Berkeley-educated socialist, so perhaps on the other end of the political spectrum. And I got both ends of it. And both of them were very clear and concurrent with what they taught me, which was that power is real. Power is manifested by human beings. Power is used by rulers. Rulers do not have sympathy for you, nor are they benevolent. And you best learn to survive, because you have to be more ferocious, you have to be more intelligent, you have to be more competent and capable than everybody else, or you'll die.
Absolutely.
A little bit rough to say that to a 4-year-old, but the fact that they did gave me the impetus to make the decision, okay, I'm going to make it. I'm not going to just fall down and wail and give up. And in fact, as part of the 9 laws, one of the stories a little bit further on, talking about preposterousness, you'll see what they were actually recommended to do with me. I'm not going to share that. I'll leave that as an Easter egg surprise for you. And you can compare that with where we are today.
Absolutely. In the book, there's one thing that really stood out for me. It's this line that says, "You must live." The prime imperative of all living things is to remain alive. The demand for survival is the infinite and timeless source of inventiveness. Life innovates by its very nature, in both exaltation and desperation. Suicide and despair are thus mortal, unforgivable sins. Can you expound on that a little bit, Ivan?
Certainly. So, as a human being, more than that, as an organism, why are you here? You're taking up space. You're using resources. You have goals, you have hopes and dreams and plans. What stops you from simply giving up today? I'm a human being myself. I'm no stranger to sorrow, loss, resentment, despair, all of those things. In particular, because I'm deaf, one of the things that my wife, Lauren, points out to me is that I spend a lot of time in my own head, again, cut off from people. So despair might perhaps be something that's easier for the solitary folks to fall into. But that does not change the reality of things. You are responsible for your own life. You are responsible for your own outcomes. The universe is infinitely fair, but only at the end. And today it may not be. And in fact, I can guarantee you that your experience today will not be fair. But ultimately, it all ends, and it's not an issue. But until that day, you have a responsibility as a human being to live, to achieve, to grow, to learn and laugh. There is joy in life, but it will be what you make of it. And because of that, that experience that I talk about in the 9 laws of what can you do? What is possible when the adversaries arrayed against you are more experienced, more numerous, more powerful and competent, greater intelligence? Do you just fall down and die? Do you expose your throat to the hacking knife of the murderer? That's not the way. Today, you can extrapolate that to the surveillance state. How do you evade drones and digital sniffers and email taps and constant cameras and all of the information tracking? What happens when the industrialized genocide of the Second World War is surpassed by the deep state and deep information meeting genocide? What happens? How do you conceal? How do you live? Well, I'll tell you what keeps me going is curiosity. I want to find out. I'm going to live. And that determination, you must live. You and your power are the only things that your loved ones can depend on in this world. No one is coming to save you. And when you realize how fair that ultimately is, that opens up the doors for you to really explore what you're capable of as a human being. And inventiveness is driven by despair, certainly. Look at any plant even. Look at any trapped animal. That's why a trapped animal is so dangerous. Life will find a way. It's a great line from Jurassic Park, but it fits. You are alive. There is a way.
Absolutely. Very well, very well says. One of the things in your book says the dark triad man makes survival his priority. He pays attention. He fights for his life. He fights like a demon possessed. He fights with an infinite, unstoppable ferocity. He's a dark triad man. And that is the way. Always remember you must live. Survival is the first law. And now, how does one learn to really survive in this crazy world, Ivan?
Well, the first thing is pay attention. Where are you headed? What's your trajectory? What do you watch? Let's say routes leave a sinking ship. It's not just in one direction. You don't always think of abandonment. Where is money flowing? Let me step out for a minute and give folks maybe a more easily recognizable and maybe graphic example of that. Today, Donald Trump was inaugurated the 45th president of the United States. Where have we seen major companies going? Ford, General Motors, Verizon, and other companies bringing jobs back to the United States. Where are things moving? Learn to understand that. There are some smart folks at those companies that have seen where things are headed, and they're making the decision to move early. The early bird not only gets the worm, he also doesn't get dragged into a pit in a nameless forest and shot because he thought things would take care of themselves. Excuse me. So pay attention, and you might learn something. That's one of the most important precepts. There is always information coming in. Sure, sooner or later you need to make a decision, you need to weigh your information, and you need to take action. You need to incorporate your learning into a concrete vision that you wish to achieve. But always pay attention. Always pay attention. That's the very first step. So some of the exercises that I give in the 9 laws, for example, are part of understanding that. Where is your life at risk from your own action? Maybe something as simple as not looking before you cross the street. Take it from a deaf guy who's lived in the United States and in the United Kingdom. I've gotten hit by cars 3 times. Well, it teaches you to pay attention. That's a graphic example, but it's an accurate one. Learn, see, remember, perceive. One of my teachers used to say, expand your perspective. Increase it by expanding your perceptions. Take everything in, be aware. I think that's the first step. Whether that's study, or whether that's reassessing relationships, whether that's looking for new market opportunities, that's the first step. Be aware. See. Don't just look. See things.
What would you quantify as freedom in this brutal world? What would you define as truly being free? When you're living in a world where there's such brutality, where there's, I mean, we are finite. The time here is finite. And what does one have to strive for to achieve this freedom?
Choice. I want people to think about this for a minute. Choice needs to go in both directions, not just whether or not you have a choice in things, but where you can expand and perhaps even eliminate or erase the boundary around your choices. Ultimately, you're breathing. H.L. Mencken had a great quote. He said, within every man is the desire from time to time to spit on his hands, hoist the black flag, and start cutting throats. Now, that's very true if you think about that. That's exactly what we see literally happening in the Middle East. The black flag is up, throats are cut on a scale that we have not seen in many generations. Well, how is that happening? They chose to. And when you realize that in this dark world, the ultimate, most basal choice you have is made every moment to accord with boundaries or not accord with boundaries, to move boundaries or adhere to them, that's where freedom lies. Everything is a choice. I heard the other day an expression that made a lot of sense to me when you think about it. Every slave was a slave by choice. It chose life as a slave rather than death and dignity. That's not a choice that everyone wants to make. But ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Choose. It's up to you. You don't get another lifetime to try it over in. Right here, right now is what you have. So what's your choice today? Free? Slave? Work for someone else? Work for yourself? Marry this woman or not marry? Have children? You have the prerogative as a human being. You are the apex predator of the known universe. There is nothing out there in all of creation that we can see that's more dangerous than you. That doesn't mean to be destructive, but it means to appreciate your own competence and your own capability. Choose where you take it, and that's freedom.
Very, very well said. Which brings us to, let's talk about maybe a combination of purpose and power. A lot of people don't understand why they're even here. Like, what is the point of life? A lot of people are complainers, and so often I say this to a lot of individuals, be careful, because life and death are in the power of the tongue. One of the things I realize is that whatever you speak, whatever you think of, you begin to create the constructs of your own prison. What would you say to individuals, Ivan, that are bound because of their own negative thoughts, that are not in the right mindset? How would they find their purpose? And how would that purpose lead them to really experience the freedom and the power that they truly do possess?
Freedom is driven by choice. Choice manifests out of your purpose. So for men who are feeling like they are bereft of purpose, it can be a very difficult thing, feeling lost. Why am I here? What's the point? Not even an existential question. Why am I doing the things I do? Why am I in this marriage? Why am I in this job? Why am I in this city? Why am I doing this again every day? What's your purpose? There's a couple things to understand about how purpose works. One is that to look for a brilliant, bright, singular purpose in life, from birth to death, probably not going to happen for you. I won't call it unnatural, but I will call it improbable. As a man, as you go through life, you will find many purposes, and that's important. Just as you diversify a portfolio, just as you diversify your friendships, you have to diversify your purposes as well. Now, from time to time, you may eliminate some and focus on one to the exclusion of others. It's not about finding balance necessarily. It's about driving the impact of fate that your heart tells you is necessary. And I use the term sacred purpose. And I think a lot of where that comes from and what that boils down to is defining what I mean by sacred in this point. Got two realms here. You have Western concept of prayer, an internal, maybe spoken, perhaps thought, certainly felt dialogue with a conscious creator. On the Eastern half, you may have meditation or that concentrated, focused purity of thought that's very infinitely open and receptive. Those are two sides of the same coin. They're both experiences of the numinous. They're both penetrations into the sacred, penetration into the self by the sacred. And in that opening up, that sense of acceptance, that sense of being, and I'm going to say this, being female in a way, to the direction of fate, to the way of heaven, to the will of heaven, where things are headed. You discover your role in it. None can generate tawdry, transient, and shallow purposes for themselves very easily. I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to go out and get laid. I'm going to make a couple extra bucks. Those are not bad things, but understand their depth. Understand that the deeper that you go, the more sacred the possibility is, the more profound the fulfillment, and of course, the greater risk that you're going to encounter. Is my purpose sacred? How do I know? Is it risky? Is it real? Will it leave things behind me if I'm blown apart into a pink mist with my entrails scattered over the desert? These are questions you need to ask yourself. Now, the 9 Laws has some exercises in it that are designed to help you uncover that. Some of them are maybe unpleasant to do. They can be a little bit emotionally disturbing to undertake those exercises. You know, I come from an English heritage. As I mentioned, my father was a Royal Horse Guards officer, and English history was important to me, important to my family. And of course, part of that is how did the sovereign conduct himself in moments of extremity? Did you want to be the extremity that the sovereign had an issue with? Probably not. What would it have been like to wait in the Tower of London, knowing that your head would be struck off your shoulders before the next morning? What would you think about? What's left undone? There was someone who didn't tell you loved? Was there a plan that you didn't make for those left behind? Were there words unspoken? All of those things go through your mind. Well, that's one of the exercises on the 9 Laws. Seclude yourself. Experience that to the best of your ability. Frame your mind, frame your heart. In fact, frame your body in prayer for death at dawn. Ask yourself those questions. Be willing to accept the answers. They will come from a place in you may not be familiar with. And that's fine. Hear them. Learn them. And the next day, go about your work, go about your living, and see whether it accords with what you've discovered. And as you go through that kind of process, you learn more about what your purpose is. It may be as simple as identifying, this is not my purpose. It may be the fulfillment of acknowledging, I am on the path, I am following the way, I am doing what I was here to do. Probably it will be a mixture. But that training, that process of winnowing the self down, letting go of the ego, accepting your own death, accepting that what you've done so far is it. That teaches you where you need to go. And that's just one of the exercises on the 9 laws. There's a multitude of them. You need to tumble and turn them all. But what I've tried to do is structure it so that you have an entry place into this type of training, into this type of mindset, thinking and feeling and working within this world that you can get hold of. Don't throw a man a rapier and expect him to dance with steel. Throw him a hammer and tell him, smash here. It's a little easier. So that's how the 9 laws starts, to give you the opportunity to try living in a different way. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Certainly there's immense joy in life, but part of being able to capture that and seize that is learning how things operate, getting into the core of yourself. Well, that's one of the ways to be competent at it. So, Viv, back to you. I'm not sure if I've fallen off the radar.
Be you there? Give me 1 second, Ivan. Let me see where.
Oh, wait, I'm here. I apologize. I had the mute button on and I kept talking like an idiot.
Right.
Ivan, I very, very strong points you've made. One of the things I wanted to say is this: in your own personal life, what were some of the achievements you've achieved from applying these laws into your own life? What are some of the highlights that you realize, hey, that you're really onto something special, that you're really onto something different, that you're learning the spiritual mechanics of how this world is really structured?
You know, the first thing that comes to my mind was when I first decided to move to Europe. I was 22. And, because of my parentage, I have dual citizenship, a British passport as well. So I thought, what the hell? I moved to Amsterdam. And I remember vividly standing on a street corner late on a Friday night, surrounded by people. I did not speak their language. I didn't know anyone. I had no clue what I was going to do. And I could feel, despite that, I'm going to make it. I'm hard to kill. I'm smart. I'm educated. I can figure this out. And even though I don't know the language, I know I'll find my way. And that process of boiling that down, nothing but the bag on my back, a set of clothes, and that teaches you things. You have to throw yourself into the mix. There are other aspects of life that are similar to that. You can't really envision them accurately until you've gone through it. Being a parent is probably the most resonant of those. Being married is different from what you imagine. And I think going through the challenges of being a parent, the challenges of being married, the challenges of striking my way out into the professional world. For listeners out there, I ended up in the finance world as a project and program manager on multi-million-dollar projects. I have a high school diploma. And in the 9 laws, that has from time to time brought some challenges that you'll read about. But nonetheless, challenges are why we're here. So I think on the far side, my current side of those experiences, the way that I know this works is because fear and anxiety are things that have become not controllers any longer. I'm not driven by fear. I'm not driven by anxiety. I'm not driven by the desperation, but by what I can innovate and what I can see. And that's been something that's driven my training for some time, but now I feel personally that I've come into a more full flower of my age. I'm very excited, in fact, to reach the age of 50 and look back, see where the 9 laws has gone, see where my life has gone, and what's next. May not make it. I hope to. I plan to. But I'm aware that that's not necessarily a guarantee. So in terms of where else, what have I achieved? What's been a highlight? Well, I think certainly one of the things has been learning to master social interaction. I had a vivid experience once when I was probably 12 or 13 at summer camp. And my peers, kids of the same age, there was a trip that was being planned out. And I realized that they were all leaving. And the counselor, a guy I looked up to, I said, "What the heck? How come I'm not going?" And he took me aside and he said, "We don't want you to go." Oh, shock. My heart's broken. Well, why not? Because we don't like having you around. You're too difficult to interact with. Oh, my jaw drops. But that moment, then and there, I realized, okay, I'm going to learn how to do this. How do you talk to people? How do you engage their interests? How do you support them? How do you work with them? What are the foundations of charisma? And I'm here to tell you it's there. It is learnable. So today, I think a sense of achievement is that I know I can walk into a room and without speaking, I can command attention. I can capture the interest of people. I can make them laugh. I can make them cry. I can inspire them. I can frighten them. I can lead them. And I can also pass through unseen if that's what I need to do. And that ability to choose is where freedom comes from. And freedom is unbelievably satisfying.
Absolutely. What is your definition of true power?
Prerogative. Well, my father told me once, writing to me, in fact, the man on the street hates to make decisions, hates it. He will do anything to avoid making a decision. I'll put it off. I'll put it on other men. I'll put it on anyone else willing to take that mantle of prerogative. But the leader simply says, it was my decision. Now, he came from a culture that's a little different from our American culture of pure merit is our objective here. And what he said was that in England, they had a tradition of expecting their leaders to be born and not made. Now, whether that's still true or not is an entirely separate matter. But he was clear to me that his expectation was that I would be a leader. I was born to that. That was my role. So I examined that as I grew in terms of his definition of it, which I found to be very workable for me. Prerogative. That is where power comes from. What is the outcome that will take place? If I have power, and I steer, and I influence, and I direct that outcome, I'm powerful. And if I'm steering and directing things, if fate explodes into reality based on my vision, my competence, and my plan, then what takes place in the future for everyone is my prerogative. Now, power brings responsibility. That's your prerogative too. People like to say it's lonely at the top. But when you get there, you realize that's true, but in more than one way. It's not just lonely because you make decisions by yourself. It's lonely because there aren't many people like you. So perhaps you could say, in a way, that the 9 laws is my effort and my way of bringing men up so that I have some brothers up here.
Absolutely, man. I think this whole thing with the 9 laws, this whole thing that you've done with this book, it is very deep, and it's like for people to really experience it, they really have to really get it. They really have to, get it into their hearts, into their souls. It's very profound, absolutely very profound. So when a person has that prerogative to be powerful, we come to a position where we realize, and I guess one of the realizations to having the freedom, having the purpose, and having the power is to realize that, like in your book, it says no laws. What do you mean by that? By no laws?
Let's think about something for a minute. I'm going to start from maybe a silly example and expand from it. Van Halen has a song called Right Now. And folks back from the 80s may remember a video that they would show right now this is happening, right now that is happening as they're singing. One of the things they showed was a guy pushing a stick figure, pushing a man over another man kneeling behind it. Junior high trick, we've all seen that, right? And they said, right now, our government is doing things we think only other countries do. That's true, isn't it? We know that's true. So what is law? Law is the organization of society. That's true. Laws are boundaries. But laws are mere theory. Hand me a law, a physical law, not a piece of paper that talks about it. It's just an idea. Now, without laws, society doesn't work. But think of it as a gradient. It's a continuum, a spectrum of adherence to it. Do you think kings abide by the law, or is it the farthest back room of the king where decisions are made? You know, one of the things that illustrated that to me, I was at Hampton Court in England, and there's a gigantic room, a huge drawing room, full of beautiful weapons, immense, where all the courtiers would gather. And if you wanted an audience with a minister or with the king himself, you had to go there and wait. And think of a long shotgun hallway with distant rooms all on one side of the building. And beyond that drawing room was the throne room. Beyond that was the secretary's room. Beyond that might be the royal bedroom. Beyond that would be the queen bedroom. Beyond that would be where the king really slept. Past that would be where the king really worked. And the deeper you went, the deeper the power was. And the truth is, and this is still true today, it has always been true, the deeper you go, the less law there is, and more pure prerogative of decision. Understanding that is very important. Laws may cause men to investigate your death, but they will not save you in the moment of truth. The rise of ISIS in the Middle East today is a pure example of the pointless lack of utility and strength of international law. One can also successfully argue, I would say, that it's a complete collapse of moral law. It's a reversion to the most destructive form of human power. What stops them? What would their reaction be if you told them, you can't bad me, it's illegal? Law is force. Law is power, but it's power expressed by the decisions of men. What's lawful in one generation is a crime in the next. Understand, there are no laws. There's only how things are done most of the time today. That is not an encouragement to break law. You will bear the consequences of your actions. But it is my encouragement to you to see things as they are. Reality is what's left over after the lights go out. Understand that that doesn't change. And laws are manufactured for the most part for the benefit of those in power to make profit an orderly process. There is nothing sacred about human law. Never forget that.
Absolutely. Ivan, we have about 5 minutes left in the broadcast. I would love for you to, give your last closing comments, perhaps a word of encouragement, perhaps a quick dissertation on what people need to do. And also, please, how they can, your website as well as your social media and where they can get your book.
Certainly. So let's start with the social media and the website, because I'd like to close out on perhaps a more personally profound engagement. So on Twitter, Dark Triad Man. I'm also on gab.ai as Dark Triad Man. And my website is primarily darktriadman.com. And of course, you can read more about the 9 laws on the9laws.com. Now, let's turn to encouragement. I want to speak to those out there that are listening to this. It's very easy, as I mentioned earlier on in this broadcast, to fall into despair, to feel insignificant against the vast forces that move back and forth across the surface of the earth. But all things only take one man, and every king knows this and fears it. You are a human being. You are made in the image of God. And I say that not from a Western theological perspective, or even from an Eastern one, but from the basic, most fundamental perspective possible. You are the ruler of the wide world. It is up to you to manifest how you choose. You will be faced with many challenges in life. You may be going through that right now. I receive emails, sometimes even instant chat messages from men that are going through enormous amounts of pain, suffering from unimaginable loss. But they're still there. They haven't given up. They're pushing forward. And in many ways, part of what my work is here, just to extend a hand. And I'm not going to be full of pity for you. Compassion is not why I'm here. There's plenty of that out there in the world. I'm here to give you a hard hand as a brother and grab you and pull you up and say, here, this is the way. Take this book, read it, learn it, study it, live it, and you will find that gates open for you. Not out of pity, not out of false entitlement, not because you wish it would, but because you earned it and you've paid for it and it's yours. And that is the most satisfying way to live, to know that everything you possess, you've earned. Consequences, wealth, relationships, experiences, you have it in you. And because I am your brother, it's my wish for you to achieve it. And that's where I leave you. Read the 9 laws. Practice, train, share. Understand that there are unimaginable atrocities taking place in the world. There are forces arrayed against the West that wish to see it destroyed. You are the fortress in between. You are responsible for the survival of yourself, your loved ones, your community, your culture, your nation, and Western civilization itself. Armies win. Loners die. Grow strong. Find your brothers. They're out there and they look just as hard for you. It has never been easier before to find them the way it is today. And as I note in the laws, you only have to search half the distance, and they'll meet you there. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Very, very, very profound words. Guys, look, here's the deal. This entire broadcast is very deep. You might need to go back and listen to it 2, maybe 3 times. You might need to go back and take out a notebook and take notes on it 2 or 3 times. Or you could do this, and this is a shameless plug. I'm not even, I don't get anything out of promoting this. The fact of the matter that this book, The 9 Laws, is absolutely profound. It is life-altering. If you are sick and tired of being sick and tired. If you are just about had it being a victim and you want to learn how to be a victor, you want to learn how to be and what the definition of being empowered is, to being the captain of your own destiny. To understand what Ivan has said, that you take the very hammer and you crack a fissure upon this thing called life, and you extract from life what you want out of it. No longer an unwilling accomplice, just going along to whatever may come your way, but being somebody who's an active participant, somebody who is literally commanding the world around him. This is where the 9 laws comes in. This is why this book is a hidden gem. It is, again, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, but for the individual, especially for men. Check it out. And once again, I want to thank my special guest, Ivan Thorne. I want to thank the captioner, Brittany, who's been captioning the entire broadcast back and forth so Ivan could participate in it. Thank you so much, Brittany, for your help. I want to thank CJ for putting this whole thing together. And I want to thank all of you guys for listening in. Get the book. I'm telling you right now, download if you have a Kindle device, you got a smartphone, go get a Kindle app, download the sample. And you will do exactly what I did. You will buy the whole damn thing. It's that important. It's very deep. And it's very hard to go into how deep this book is in an allotted 1 hour time. It's very difficult to do that. I mean, Ivan could literally speak for days on the subject and will not even be scratching the surface. So with that being said, guys, follow Ivan on his website, darktriadman.com, as well as his Twitter, at the Dark Triad Man. And of course, you can follow us on Rogue Money. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the podcast. That's on Apple and both Android. And the news app as well. Thank you all for listening in tonight. It's been a great year. 2017, we have some wonderful opportunities. Better yourself. Fix yourself. Make this the year that you change your life around. This is V, the Grill Economist. Our producer, CJ, and Ivan Thorne, and even Brittany. We're all signing out. Thank you so much all for listening tonight. Take it away, CJ.